All right, so welcome back to another deep dive.
Absolutely.
And today we're going deep on a topic that one of you fine folks out there requested.
Oh, excellent.
We're talking systems of equations and inequalities.
Right.
Now, I know that might not sound
Yeah.
like the most exciting thing in the world,
Uh,
but trust me,
yeah.
there's some really cool stuff in here.
Oh, absolutely.
And, we're going to uncover some pretty fascinating applications.
So sure.
And I think you'll see how it's a lot more relevant
Mm-hmm.
to your life today than you might think.
Absolutely.
So to guide us through this,
Yes.
we've got our in-house math whiz here,
Hello.
who I'm very confident
Okay.
can make
Yeah.
even the most intimidating math concepts seem crystal clear.
Oh, I hope so.
So looking at the source material
Yeah.
that this request was based on,
Okay.
we've got 4 main areas:
Right.
solving systems of equations by graphing,
Okay.
substitution and elimination methods,
Yeah.
applications of systems of equations, and
Mhm.
systems of inequalities.
Very good.
So where do we even begin with all this?
Well, I think the best place to start is just by understanding what a system of equations actually is.
Okay,
Because once we have that foundation, everything else will kind of fall into place.
gotcha.
So a system of equations is basically when you have 2 or more equations that are related to each other in some way.
Okay,
They're kind of interconnected. And the goal is to find the values of the variables that make all of the equations true at the same time.
so like a solution that works for all the equations.
Exactly. It's
Right.
kind of like,
Yeah.
those logic puzzles where you have to figure out who committed the crime based on a bunch of different clues.
Okay,
Each equation is like a clue.
all right.
And the solution is the point where all those clues intersect and reveal the answer.
I like that analogy.
Yeah,
Like detective work.
exactly.
Okay, so let's dive into those 4 areas we mentioned.
Yeah.
Starting with solving systems of equations by graphing.
So when we solve by graphing, what we're doing is we're visually representing each equation on a coordinate plane.
Right.
And each equation will create a line.
Right.
And the point where those lines intersect is the solution to the system.
So you can actually see the solution on the graph.
Yes, exactly.
That's pretty cool.
It's a very visual way to understand what's going on.
Right. And it makes sense. Like, if the solution has to satisfy both equations,
Yeah,
it has to be where the lines cross.
precisely.
But what if we don't have a graph handy?
Right.
Are there other ways to solve these systems?
Definitely.
Okay.
That's where the substitution and elimination methods come in.
Okay, so tell me about substitution.
So with substitution, you essentially solve one of the equations for one of the variables.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you solve for x.
Okay.
Then you substitute that expression for x into the other equation.
Okay.
And that way you get rid of one of the variables and you're left with an equation that you can solve.
So it's like simplifying the problem.
Exactly. It breaks it down into smaller steps.
Gotcha. And what about elimination?
With elimination, the goal is to manipulate the equations so that when you add them together, one of the variables cancels out.
Okay.
So, for example, if you have one equation where the x coefficient is 2 and another equation where the x coefficient is -2,
Okay.
you can add those equations together and the x terms will disappear.
Right, because 2 plus -2 is 0.
Exactly.
So then you're just left with an equation in terms of y.
Precisely. And then you can solve for y.
That's pretty clever.
It's a powerful technique.
So we've talked about how to solve these systems.
Yes.
But I'm curious how this all connects to real life.
Sure.
Can you give us some concrete examples?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Systems of equations are used in all sorts of fields.
Like what?
Well, let's say you're a business owner.
Yeah, okay.
And you're trying to figure out the optimal pricing for your products. You could use a system of equations to model the relationship between price, demand, and profit. And the solution to that system would give you the price point that maximizes your profit.
So it's like finding that sweet spot
Exactly.
where you're making the most money.
Yes.
Cool.
Or let's say you're an engineer
Okay.
and you're designing a bridge.
Mm-hmm.
You could use systems of equations to analyze the forces and stresses on the bridge structure
That makes sense.
and make sure that it's safe and stable.
So it's all about finding solutions that meet certain criteria.
Yes, exactly.
And this is just scratching the surface.
Oh, yeah, there are countless applications.
Wow. Now, what about systems of inequalities?
Right, so systems of inequalities are similar to systems of equations.
Okay.
But instead of looking for a single point that satisfies all the equations,
Yeah.
we're looking for a range of values that satisfy all the inequalities.
A range of values.
Yes, because with inequalities, we're not dealing with exact equalities,
Right.
but rather with relationships like greater than or less than.
Gotcha. So can you give me an example?
Sure, let's say you're planning a party. and you have a limited budget.
Always a good idea.
And you need to figure out how many guests you can invite and how much food you can buy. You could use a system of inequalities to represent the constraints on your budget.
So like the maximum amount you can spend on food
Exactly.
and the maximum number of guests you can afford.
Yes, and the solution to that system would give you a range of possibilities that meet all of your requirements.
So like a set of options that work within your budget.
Precisely.
That's really helpful.
It's all about finding the feasible region.
The feasible region.
Yeah, the set of all possible solutions.
Gotcha. So I'm starting to see how all this ties together.
Yeah.
You know, at first it seemed kind of abstract,
Sure.
but you've really brought it to life with these examples.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
It's amazing how these concepts
Yeah.
can be applied to so many different situations.
Oh, absolutely. They're incredibly versatile.
This has been a really enlightening deep dive.
Yeah, it's been fun.
I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective
Excellent.
on systems of equations and inequalities.
That's great.
So for our listeners out there,
Yes.
think about how you could apply these concepts in your own life. Maybe you're trying to optimize your budget.
Right.
Or make a decision with multiple constraints.
Sure.
Systems of equations and inequalities can give you a framework for finding solutions
Absolutely.
that work within those limitations.
They're powerful tools.
So keep exploring, keep learning,
Yes.
and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Sounds good.
Thanks for listening.
See you later.